is Sadlier Level D. Ooh, that was the dog. Unit 4A, Vocabulary. So our first word for this unit is anarchy, which is a noun. It's not a verb. It's a thing, not an action. And it's a lack of government and law or confusion. Your synonyms are chaos, disorder, turmoil, and pandemonium, which is such a fun word. Your antonyms are peace and quiet. And you have another noun form of the word. An anarchist is a person that believes in or engages in or pushes for anarchy. Our sentence, because it doesn't always have to do with just the government. It was complete anarchy in the classroom when Miss Beck didn't show up to school and her students went wild in 201. So if I didn't show up to school one day, there might be a lack of rules and regulations. There might be some confusion. There would definitely be a lot of chaos, especially in some of my classes. Then we get to auspicious, which is an adjective that means favorable or fortunate. And we'll pay attention to the sentences and how I used the word so that you can kind of make sense of how you would use auspicious in a sentence. Your synonyms are promising, encouraging, or propitious. I think I said that right. And your antonyms are ill-omened and sinister. You have your adverb form, which is auspiciously. That is a really, really common form of this word. You see that almost as much as just the adjective form auspicious. And auspiciousness is our noun form. And we've got a picture of a four-leaf clover. If you find one, it's an auspicious sign that you might have some luck coming your way. And I gave you two sentences for auspicious. Her 100% on the practice test for vocab was an auspicious sign that she would do well on the actual test. It was a favorable sign. It was a promising sign. It was suggesting that she would have good luck when she took the test because she did so well on the practice test. And then another form of it, sort of the fortunate, go with it, form of this word. How auspicious to see you here, Miss Beck. I was just hoping to run into you. So if you were actually looking for me, you wanted to see me, not if you didn't want to see me and we just happened to run into each other at like Wawa. But if you were looking for me and I wasn't in my classroom and we ran into each other, maybe in the media center, I'm making copies and you came in to check out a book because you all love to read, you could be like, oh, this is super auspicious. Like how fortunate, how promising that we ran into each other here. So that's how you can use the word auspicious in a sentence. It's a very positive word. And then we get into a word that's maybe not quite as positive. The word is daunt, which is a verb. You've got your other verb forms, daunted, daunting, and daunts. You might be familiar with this word if you read the Divergent series, Dauntless. But daunt means to overcome with fear or to intimidate. It can dishearten. It can discourage. You can be daunted by something that like stresses you out, makes you feel like you're not going to be good at it. It seems really intimidating. Your synonyms are dismay and cow the verb form, not the noun form, not the animal. But you can be cowed by something in the same way that you can be daunted or intimidated by something. Your antonyms are encourage, embolden, and reassure. Like I said, you have those three other verb forms of the word, and then you have the adjective form dauntless, which means that you have no fear. You are unable to be daunted by things. You're very courageous, like again, like in Divergent, which I don't even know if any of you have read those series. In the picture, you can see that there are training books. If you look carefully, that's how they're labeled. And it's very daunting for the man in the cartoon to see all these different manuals for training. There's 5 of them. They're relatively thick. That can be kind of discouraging when you look at the amount that you have to do. And for our sentence, and I feel like this is true for a lot of you, the start of Lit A really daunted many students. But I hope by now you're feeling ready to rock quarter 2 and you're feeling a little less worried about things. Some of you I know felt a little bit intimidated at the beginning of the semester, switching into high school. You might have even felt discouraged, like maybe you weren't going to do well, but please don't be daunted by any of that. I'm sorry, I just did finger guns. Another word on the list that I really love is hoodwink. Hoodwink is a verb and it means to mislead someone by a trick or to swindle someone. You might say that there are characters in stories that are able to hoodwink other characters. You might know what I'm talking about. Your synonyms are a little silly: to put one over on, sort of like, again, you're able to trick somebody, or to fool. Your antonym is disabuse. You've got your other verb forms as always: hoodwinked, hoodwinking, and hoodwinks. And the person who is doing the swindling, the person who is misleading by a trick, the person who is doing the hoodwinking is a hoodwinker, which is your noun form of it, that ER ending. And in our picture, the woman is pointing like, hey, look over there. And she has misled this man. She has hoodwinked him, and she is able to steal some money from him, pilfer it, if you will. And for our sentence, he attempted to hoodwink his sister into giving him all of her Halloween candy, but she didn't fall for the trick. Now, hoodwink you wouldn't use for anything really, really extreme. Like you wouldn't hoodwink someone into being kidnapped or murdered. It's usually for something a little less severe than that. You might see it used a lot in terms of somebody stealing or tricking someone out of their money, like multi-level marketing schemes, Ponzi schemes, pyramid schemes. They hoodwink people and they take all of their money. Then we get to inanimate. This might be a word you're familiar with because when we talk about personification, we usually will use the word inanimate. And when we talk about like the non-human things that we are personifying. So inanimate is the adjective word. It means not having life or without energy or spirit. Something that's not alive is inanimate. Your synonyms are dead and spiritless. Your antonyms living, alive, energetic, and sprightly. You do have other forms of the word. Inanimately is the adverb form, and inanimateness, an ESS ending, is your noun form. But more commonly, you do just hear the word inanimate, especially with the phrase inanimate object, an object that is not living. So in that picture, we're looking at an artist's still life, which is a type of painting where you don't have a human being in the painting. And usually you set up various inanimate things and you paint them because they don't move. And some artists will put a skull in there as a little nod to nothing in this picture is alive, even though it once was. And for our sentence, because her daughter is very attached to her stuffed animal, she doesn't treat it like an inanimate object, and instead it's like her best friend. Some of you may have had a stuffed animal friend growing up as well. Incinerate is another word you might be somewhat familiar with. It is a verb and it means to burn something to ashes. So you can incinerate different things. Your synonyms are burn up, cremate, or reduced to ashes. And there are no antonyms to this word because there is not an opposite of to burn to ashes. You just wouldn't do that. Your other forms are your other verb forms: incinerating, incinerated, and incinerates. You have incineration, which is a noun form. And the other word form you might be familiar with, another noun, the incinerator, is the thing that does the incinerating. So our picture is a big blazing fire that is incinerating all of the trees. And our sentence, which is again why this word might feel familiar to you, the dog in There Will Come Soft Rains was incinerated. Later on in the story, most of the house is also incinerated after a fire starts in the kitchen. And the dog was incinerated because it was put into the incinerator. Larceny. There are so many words about theft in ninth grade vocabulary for some weird reason. But be careful with this one. Larceny is a noun. It is not a verb. You cannot larceny someone or something. You can commit an act of larceny. You can be in trouble for larceny, but you cannot just larceny a thing. You don't larceny a painting or money. So it's the noun. It's theft. So your antonyms are stealing and robbery. You have no antonyms. And your other form is just the plural noun form larcenies. Notice because it ends in Y with a consonant before it, we have an IES ending. That man is committing an act of larceny. He is pilfering that woman's wallet from her purse. And the sentence, which is obviously true, after she was caught committing multiple larcenies of valuable original Prince of Poe stories, Miss Beck was in trouble with her job and had to return everything she took. I got in so much trouble. I committed some theft, committed some larcenies, had to return all the Poe stuff. Oops. But again, not a verb. Don't use it as an action. It is a thing. It's an activity. It's not an activity you should participate in. Shouldn't go to the Wawa and be like, I'm going to commit a larceny right now. But make sure you're not using it as a standalone action. Pliant. If you're thinking, oh, that looks like a contortionist, everything relates back to what we're doing in class. Pliant is an adjective. It means bending readily or easily influenced. So you have the physical version of pliant, which is what that girl is in that picture, where she is totally bent backwards in a very flexible way. But you can also be pliant as a person. Like if somebody can manipulate you or sway you into seeing a different opinion, you could describe that person as pliant. Oh, their opinion is really, really pliant. They kind of just are very easily bending to the whims and wills of another person. Your synonyms are supple, flexible, elastic, and plastic. Your antonyms, rigid, stiff, inflexible, or set in stone. So if you are very opinionated about something, you think Taylor Swift is the greatest musical artist of your generation, you are not very pliant when it comes to opinions about other musical artists. You're very set in your ways. Pliantly is the adverb form. That girl is bending pliantly. And pliantness is the noun form. And my sentence is about a non-living thing. The rubber spatulas I use for baking are pliant enough to remove things from even from irregularly shaped pans. So if you are somebody that cooks, you might know what I mean. Sometimes people call them scrapers because you can use them to scrape stuff off the side of the bowl, but they usually bend a little bit. And if you've got pans that have corners, if they're pliant enough, they can help you get everything out of those pans. And then we get to prototype. That picture is probably crazy for all of you. Prototype is a noun, and it means an original model on which later versions are patterned. So that is not obviously the first computer ever, but it is a prototype of what became the desktop computer. I know not many people have desktops in their homes anymore, and they definitely don't look like that. My first home computer looked similar to that, not quite. Check the mouse. That is a rectangle. I think that's crazy, but it is a prototype for what later computers were used as their design. Your synonyms are example and sample. Your antonym is a copy. You have one other form, the plural noun form, prototypes. Sometimes you will design something first to see how it's going to work, and you can call that the prototype. So before making hundreds of dresses, the designer first makes some prototypes to check for any issues. So they'll make some original designs of fashion to make sure that the seams line up, where the zipper is, it makes sense, it fits people, it hangs nicely. And then once they look at that prototype and everything's good, that's when they'll mass produce whatever it might be. Rectify. Rectify is a verb, and it means to make right or to correct. You can rectify a situation. You can rectify a problem. Your synonym is set right, to fix something. Your antonyms are mess up, to botch something, or to bungle something, which is such a fun word. If you mess something up, you can be like, I bungled it. I bungled that vocab test. You've got your other verb forms as always, rectifying, rectifies, and rectified. There is a noun form, rectification. It's not nearly as common as just the general verb forms. You can see that picture. That person is rectifying that essay. They're going through, they're correcting the errors, they're fixing the mistakes. And our sentence, when the student was caught with their cell phone out during class again, Ms. Beck requested that they rectify their mistake and leave the phone with Mr. Roth each day to make right the fact that they kept pulling their phone out and it was making everybody crazy. And with that, we have reached the end of our 4A vocabulary words. Hope this was helpful.